To quote Stevie Nicks, I think I have to go my own way.
What the fuck, dude? We've been here doing this for 14 years.
Ever wondered what really happened behind the roaring engines and high-speed builds of the show Fast and Loud? Richard Rawlings was the face of one of television's most popular car restoration shows. But behind the garage doors, a whole lot more was going on, and the journey of Gas Monkey Garage wasn't all grease and glory. In fact, the entire show wasn't as smooth as the polished chrome on their cars. And there were so many hidden struggles and shocking twists they tried to hide from the world. After a successful run on television, Richard suddenly called it quits, leaving one troubling question in the minds of everyone. What caused the show to come to an abrupt end, and why did Richard make the decision to walk away when the spotlight was still shining bright? The secrets behind this show will definitely make you see the Gas Monkey Garage in a whole new light. Before the cameras rolled, before the bearded swagger, the gas-guzzling muscle cars, and the wild antics of Fast and Loud, Richard Rawlings wasn't exactly the kind of guy you'd expect to end up on national television. But let's get one thing straight. Richard always knew how to hustle. Born in Fort Worth, Texas in 1969, he wasn't raised with a silver spoon. He wasn't some rich kid handed the keys to a trust fund and a garage full of classic cars. However, his love for cars came the old-fashioned way, from his dad. They'd go to car shows together when Rawlings was just a kid, and by the time he was just 14, he had already bought his first car, a 1974 Mercury Comet. At 14, most kids were still begging for a bike, and this guy was already handling steel. By the time he hit 16, he wasn't just obsessed with cars, he was building them, racing them, and selling them. However, he didn't just like cars. It was the deal-making, the energy, and the chase that had him interested. He had this natural ability to talk his way into or out of just about anything. Rawlings literally tried his hand at everything. He worked as a firefighter, a police officer, and even a paramedic. He always said he needed jobs that kept him on the move, but even while he was out saving lives, the car world was always calling him back. Eventually, he made a pivot into sales. And here's where his natural gift for persuasion kicked into high gear. He started in printing and advertising, and not only did he crush it, he ended up owning his own printing and advertising company. It was pretty successful, but you could tell he was getting bored. The suits, the boardrooms, and the structure were not his style. Rawlings wanted adrenaline. He wanted oil, engines, horsepower, and chaos. So in true Richard fashion, he sold the company and dove headfirst into what really lit him up, the world of custom cars. And just like that, Gas Monkey Garage was born. It wasn't some sleek, shiny empire in the beginning. It was actually a scrappy little shop tucked away in Dallas, Texas. But Rawlings had a vision. He wasn't just building cars, he was building a brand. You see, he knew how to spot undervalued classics, fix them up fast, and flip them for a profit. But more than that, he knew how to tell a story. Every car had a past, every deal had drama. And Richard Rawlings, he was the perfect showman. It wasn't long before people started noticing him, not just car guys, but producers, networks, and yes, even the big names at Discovery Channel. And when the Discovery Channel finally came calling, Richard didn't hesitate. Fast and Loud premiered in 2012, and let's just say it was an overnight success. The show was loud, fast, chaotic, and addictive. And right at the center of it all was Rawlings, making deals, pushing deadlines, clashing with mechanics, and turning junkyard relics into jaw-dropping machines. But what the cameras didn't always show was the stress, the pressure, the empire building behind the scenes, and the cracks that slowly started forming. The rise of Fast and Loud. When Fast and Loud hit television screens in 2012, nobody, except maybe Richard Rawlings himself, knew it would explode the way it did. The show wasn't just another car program. It was loud, fast-paced, packed with personality, and powered by a guy who had the charm of a rock star and the brain of a businessman. This wasn't some boring how-to mechanic show. Fast and Loud was different, and that's exactly why it worked. At its core, the show was all about taking old, beat-up, rusted-out cars, some found rotting in barns, others sitting in junkyards, and bringing them back to life. But this wasn't a slow, methodical restoration. In fact, every project came with insane deadlines, tight budgets, and the pressure of flipping each car for a profit. It was all business, all adrenaline, and all chaos. The formula was genius. Each episode followed a basic structure. Richard Rawlings would hunt down a car, negotiate a deal, and then bring it back to the Gas Monkey garage and throw the challenge to his team of mechanics, most notably Aaron Kaufman, the laid-back but brilliant fabricator who was basically Richard's partner. While Aaron and the crew worked their magic by cutting, welding, painting, and grinding, Richard was out doing what he did best, selling the dream. He would set up auctions, chase down buyers, and make sure the finished car didn't just look good but sold big. And that's exactly what kept the lights on at Gas Monkey and the show flying. But what really set the show apart from other car shows was the urgency. Every episode felt like a race. It was always a matter of if the build would be finished in time. Another thing that set the show apart was Richard Rawlings himself. He wasn't a mechanic. He didn't spend hours under the hood with a wrench in hand. But make no mistake, he was the engine behind the entire show. Rawlings brought something different to the screen. He was a sharp businessman, and so he had a way of making car deals feel like high-stakes poker games, and his personality kept the show moving even when the builds hit roadblocks. But what really set him apart was his ability to turn Gas Monkey Garage into a recognizable brand. While most garages are focused on tools and engines, Rawlings was focused on logos, merchandise, and marketing. He understood how to build hype and how to sell the Gas Monkey image, and it wasn't long before the Skull and Wrenches logo was showing up everywhere, on hats, shirts, stickers, and even beer cans. He also had an instinct for what would look good on television. Every car he brought in had a story, every deal had tension, and every negotiation, whether with a car seller, a buyer, or one of his own crew, was turned into a scene worth watching. His personality helped blur the lines between reality television and real business, and this was what kept both gearheads and casual fans tuning in. Rawlings always played to the camera, but never in a fake or overly scripted way. He was fast-talking, confident, and a little bit cocky, but that was exactly what fans came to expect. And when the team eventually delivered a finished build, it was Richard who stepped up to sell it. He handled the clients, negotiated the price, and closed the deal. If it sold high, he celebrated. If it fell flat, he took the heat. Either way, he kept the show moving and the audience engaged. From the moment it launched, Fast and Loud was a hit. Within its first few seasons, it became one of Discovery Channel's highest-rated shows, regularly pulling in millions of viewers. It aired 16 seasons between 2012 and 2020. A rare run for a non-scripted automotive series. One reason for its success was its broad appeal. While gearheads loved the car content, casual viewers were drawn to the storytelling, the personalities, and the high-stakes drama. The format made it easy to jump in at any point. You didn't have to know anything about cars to enjoy it. You just had to enjoy watching people under pressure trying to make something work. Viewers also connected with the brand. Gas Monkey Garage became more than just a setting. It became a symbol. The garage's rugged rock and roll aesthetic, complete with raw steel walls, loud music, and a no-nonsense crew, gave the show a distinct visual identity. It was gritty, bold, and uniquely Texan. And it didn't stop at the television screen. Gas Monkey merchandise exploded. Fans lined up for branded apparel. Richard Rawlings capitalized on the momentum by launching Gas Monkey Bar and Grill, opening locations in Texas, and even branching into energy drinks and tequila. The brand expanded rapidly, driven by the popularity of the show and Rawlings' relentless business mindset. The show also gained a global audience. Fast and Loud aired in multiple countries and was available on streaming platforms, introducing the Gas Monkey style to viewers around the world. It brought American car culture to a broader audience and helped spark renewed interest in vintage car restorations. It was also a celebrity magnet. Over the years, the show featured appearances by stars from music, sports, and entertainment, including NASCAR legend Kurt Busch. The garage became a cultural landmark, not just a television set. By the mid-2010s, the show was firmly embedded in pop culture. Richard Rawlings became a recognizable figure far beyond car circles. He was invited to talk shows, wrote an autobiography titled Fast and Loud, Blood, Sweat, and Beers, and was often seen at car events across the United States, meeting fans and promoting the Gas Monkey brand. There's no denying the impact of the show. For nearly a decade, it helped redefine car shows on television. It proved that automotive content could be exciting, dramatic, and massively profitable. And Richard Rawlings stood at the center of it all. But as the seasons rolled on, despite the success, behind the scenes, Richard Rawlings and the entire crew were going through some unimaginable challenges that they tried to hide from the fans. The challenges behind the scenes. From the outside, Fast and Loud looked like a smooth-running machine with cool cars and successful flips. But behind the scenes, there was a whole other world happening off-camera, and it wasn't always pretty. Many people didn't realize that working on a hit reality show like Fast and Loud came with serious pressure. There were some serious creative clashes and egos in the room that sometimes made the environment tense. While the show maintained a tight image for years, over time, bits and pieces eventually started leaking out. Former crew members and insiders began to share what it was really like working behind the scenes at Gas Monkey Garage. And let's just say, it wasn't all burnout smoke and high fives. The pressure was intense. Filming a reality television show on a tight production schedule is already stressful. Now throw in the added pressure of actually running a profitable garage and doing it all in front of cameras. That's the kind of non-stop grind that wore people down. According to multiple interviews over the years, the deadlines on the show weren't just for television drama, they were actually real. Richard Rawlings often pushed for quick turnarounds because at the end of the day, it wasn't just about making a good show, it was also about making money. Cars had to be bought, restored, and sold as fast as possible to keep up the pace. If something delayed the process, like a missing part, a mechanic out sick, or a paint job gone wrong, it could send the whole episode into chaos. And guess what? That kind of chaos happened a lot. Deadlines got missed, tempers flared, and sometimes things just didn't work out. Builds that started with big hopes would hit wall after wall. Production crews were filming for long hours, mechanics were working overtime, and in the middle of it all, Rawlings was trying to juggle the demands of being both a businessman and a television personality. Let's not forget the fact that television production brings its own complications. Sometimes, scenes had to be reshot. Sometimes the producers needed more drama or more clarity for the storyline, and that meant extra takes, on-the-fly interviews, and staged setups that frustrated some crew members who just wanted to work on cars. Another major issue that emerged over time was the clash of creative visions. Richard Rawlings had a very specific style. He liked big builds, bold paint, lots of flash, and even more marketing potential. He wanted cars that would stand out and sell fast. But not everyone in the garage agreed with that approach. People like Aaron Kaufman, who became a fan favorite for his deep mechanical knowledge and calm demeanor, often had different priorities. Kaufman preferred precision and perfection over speed. He was passionate about the work itself, the craftsmanship, the engineering, and the long-term durability of a build. And sometimes, that just didn't line up with the show's focus on quick flips and big profits. Some fans could even see the tension on screen sometimes, but behind the scenes, it ran even deeper than that. It got so bad that Kaufman eventually made the bold decision to leave the show. He would later reveal in interviews that the growing divide between his vision and that of Rawlings was one of the main reasons he left the show in 2017. In his own words, Richard and I were having difficulty being in the same building together. It was his building, it's his show, and it's his operation. That was not a small difference. It was a fundamental divide between the two men, one that eventually became too big to ignore. And Aaron Kaufman wasn't the only one who felt that way. Other crew members who came and went over the years also hinted at similar frustrations. While Rawlings was focused on expanding the brand through merchandise, restaurants, and partnerships, some of the garage guys just wanted to build great cars without all the flash. That disconnect caused real tension, and it slowly chipped away at the team's chemistry. The truth remains that when you cram a group of big personalities into one high-pressure environment, something's bound to blow. And Fast and Loud was no exception. Though the show didn't always air the full extent of it, several insiders have claimed that conflicts were a regular part of life at Gas Monkey Garage. Differences in work ethic, personality clashes, and even disputes about money sometimes led to full-blown arguments. One of the more visible moments was Aaron Kaufman's departure, but there were others. Longtime viewers remember when mechanics like Tom Smith and Jordan Butler suddenly disappeared from the show. While the official narrative for their departure was a bit vague, it was later discovered that disagreements with production and management were at the heart of it. Tom Smith, always outspoken, later described his time at the garage as a learning experience, but he didn't shy away from saying that the environment was tough and that Richard Rawlings could be a hard person to work with when money and deadlines were on the line. In fact, Tony later confessed that he was fired from the show after he used inappropriate language during a clash with one of the managers on the show due to the intense pressure. Richard, for his part, has always been clear that he runs things on the show like a business. That kind of leadership works for some, but not everyone thrives in that type of environment. Fans sometimes wondered why the cast changed so much over the years. Why did talented crew members keep leaving? Why was there so much turnover? Well, the answer might just lie in the fact that being on a hit television show isn't always as glamorous as it looks. As time went on, and Fast and Loud approached its later seasons, more former crew members started opening up about how it felt being on the show when the cameras weren't rolling. Aaron Kaufman, after leaving the show, launched his own series called Shifting Gears with Aaron Kaufman, where he focused on builds that were more true to his vision. His move was widely seen as a response to the creative constraints he'd felt on Fast and Loud. And while he never completely trashed Rawlings or Gas Monkey, it was clear he wanted more freedom. Aside from Kaufman, multiple ex-employees also described the filming schedule as too intense and relentless. Filming often began early in the morning and went deep into the evening. Mechanics had to build real cars for real sales while also pausing to film interviews, retake scenes, or act out conversations that didn't come naturally. And over time, that dual responsibility wore people out. Some reports even revealed that some crew felt that the show leaned too heavily into drama and not enough into the builds. Others were frustrated by how their work was often edited or not shown at all. There was a sense among a few former members that their contributions weren't fully acknowledged, especially when the spotlight stayed fixed on Rawlings. At its peak, Fast and Loud wasn't just a television show anymore. It was a content factory, a brand engine, and a business empire. The cameras never stopped rolling, the cars never stopped coming, and the deadlines never got easier. And Richard Rawlings kept pushing for bigger deals, bigger builds, and broader branding. And while that drive helped him turn Gas Monkey into a global name, it also created an environment that not everyone could keep up with. And in reality, the success of the show came at a cost. Behind the roar of engines and the cheers of the fans, there was stress, turnover, and more than a few behind-the-scenes battles. And yet, through it all, the show kept going, season after season, car after car, until suddenly it didn't anymore. Richard Rawlings suddenly called it quits, leaving one question in the hearts of fans. So what exactly happened in those final seasons that made him walk away? The end of Fast and Loud. After 16 seasons, dozens of high-stakes builds, and nearly a decade of roaring engines and flipped classics, Fast and Loud came to a sudden and unexpected stop. No grand finale, no explosive final episode, just silence until Richard Rawlings himself finally addressed it. It was the end of an era, and for fans who had followed Gas Monkey Garage from day one, the news was both shocking and oddly quiet. The end didn't come with a promo or a teaser. In fact, it wasn't even announced by Discovery Channel. It came straight from Richard Rawlings himself. In 2020, Rawlings casually announced that he was no longer affiliated with Discovery Channel and that he would not be continuing the show. And just like that, it was over. Fans were left stunned, wondering if this was permanent or just a temporary hiatus. But Richard made it clear that it wasn't just a break. He was actually done. He also hinted that the decision had been in the works for a while. The final season had aired months earlier, but no official word about cancellation had been given. Fans began wondering why one of Discovery Channel's most popular automotive shows came to an end so suddenly. And according to Richard, it wasn't about ratings or network drama. It was about evolution. You see, running a garage is one thing, but running a televised garage under the watchful eyes of millions is something entirely different. Richard had spent years juggling business, branding, and production, and after almost a decade of filming non-stop, he was burned out. On Joe Rogan's podcast, he explained how the format of the show had started to feel stale to him. Each episode followed a similar structure, and although it had worked, it didn't leave much room for growth. He had to evolve, and that meant stepping away from the grind of traditional television and looking at other platforms, especially digital content, where he could have full control. As the media landscape changed, Richard started to feel boxed in by the structure of network television. Reality TV, especially on big networks like Discovery, comes with a lot of red tape, which involves production schedules, creative oversight, and strict episode formats. For a guy like Rawlings, who thrives on fast moves and new ideas, that structure eventually became a cage. Richard didn't have as much control as he had wanted, and this became more frustrating, especially as streaming and YouTube began to rise in popularity. He saw other creators thriving by doing what they wanted on their own time and their own terms, and he wanted that kind of freedom. But that's not all. He had also begun expanding the Gas Monkey brand far beyond the TV show. He had gone into restaurants, merchandise, and licensing deals just to grow Gas Monkey into an empire, not just a garage. Ending Fast and Loud finally gave him space to go full throttle into other ventures. He launched his own YouTube channel where he could post behind-the-scenes videos, car builds, and raw, unfiltered content without the constraints of network TV. He also teased upcoming projects in the works, including new shows, partnerships, and digital content that would allow him to tell stories in a different way. When Fast and Loud went off the air in 2020, a lot of people assumed that Richard Rawlings might slow down, maybe even fade into the background of the automotive world. But if you know anything about him, you know that slowing down has never been part of his vocabulary. In fact, the end of the show was really just the beginning of a whole new era for him, for Gas Monkey Garage, and for the fans who still couldn't get enough. So what has Richard Rawlings been up to since turning off the cameras at Discovery Channel? Life after Fast and Loud. Gas Monkey Garage didn't disappear when the cameras stopped rolling. In fact, the shop went through a serious transformation. Without the constraints of TV production, Rawlings finally had the freedom to build what he wanted, and that meant going upscale. Before, Richard focused mostly on American classics and vintage flips like Mustangs, Camaros, and the occasional rat rod. But after the show ended, Richard pivoted hard into high-end projects and exotic vehicles like Lamborghinis, Ferraris, and rare imports, often with six-figure price tags. The builds got more elaborate, the finishes more flawless, and Richard stopped worrying about timelines for episodes or what the network would approve. Instead, he focused on one-of-a-kind builds for high-profile clients, custom work that put Gas Monkey Garage on the same level as the world's top-tier builders. He also slimmed down the operation, with fewer builds at once and a leaner team, so that the focus could be on excellence, not episode counts. Even while he was reshaping Gas Monkey Garage behind the scenes, Richard was also planting flags in new territory. He went full-on into the digital media. Some of the most popular content featured included in-depth restorations and test drives, tours of celebrity car collections, updates on the latest Gas Monkey builds, and behind-the-scenes shop life. But YouTube wasn't the only thing on his radar. Richard also launched a podcast called the Gas Monkey Garage Podcast, where he shared business tips, car industry stories, and interviews with fellow entrepreneurs, builders, and gearheads. It gave fans a deeper look into his mindset and allowed him to connect with a broader audience beyond car TV junkies. On top of that, he leaned harder into brand expansion, and every move he made post-Fast and Loud showed that he wasn't interested in being a one-hit wonder. He wanted to own his brand, grow it, and make it last. In interviews and podcast appearances, Richard has been candid about the toll being on national television took on his personal life. While he didn't go deep into detail, fans noticed that he became more private about his relationships and family after the show ended. And while he's still loud, still flashy, and still very much Richard, there's been a subtle shift in how he presents himself. It's clear he's thinking about legacy now, not just ratings. It's easy to forget just how much Fast and Loud changed the game. Before it came along, automotive reality TV was either dry and technical or loaded with fake drama. But the show struck a rare balance. It was fun, and it brought real car culture to a massive audience. Rawlings made garage life cool again. The Gas Monkey crew weren't just mechanics, they were characters, each with their own quirks and skills. The show inspired countless fans to pick up a wrench, restore a classic, or even start their own shops. But beyond the entertainment, Fast and Loud also helped launch a whole wave of car-based content creators. People saw what Richard built, both literally and financially, and realized they didn't need a huge network deal to get started. They just needed passion, a camera, and a little grit. And even now, years after the final episode aired, Fast and Loud still has a presence. The show is still streamed globally, and fans continue to visit Gas Monkey Garage and wear the merch like a badge of honor. So in many ways, the show ended, but it never really went away. But what do you think? Did Richard Rawlings walk away at the perfect time? Or was there still fuel left in the Fast and Loud tank? Drop your thoughts in the comments. If you enjoyed this deep dive, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more interesting videos and untold stories.